Hello, this is Chad Chancellor with Next Move Group. And today I'm going to interview Mark Williams with Strategic Development Group over in South Carolina. Mark is a legend in the economic development business. He wrote a book 3 or 4 years ago, and we interviewed him called Corporate Site Selection and Economic Development, and he has revised it this year and put out his newest version. And a lot of people, Mark, the last time you wrote it, I heard as I'm just bouncing around at different conferences and all, a lot of people talked about how they were using it with board training and new staff development. So the first one was a hit. So why don't we start with a little bit of your background, just in case we got a few new viewers that may not know who you are. I doubt there'll be many, but give them a little bit about your
Yeah,
background,
sure.
and then let's get into the old book and then what you put in the new one.
Well, I started my career as a coastal engineer, and just grew to love business and consulting, and decided I was going to go get an MBA. And I got introduced to site location consulting when I was doing my MBA, and I just loved it. My first assignment was a maquiladora situation, and so I wanted to start a company, and I went and worked for the South Carolina Department of Commerce at a pretty low level. I said, 2 years, I'm out of here. I'm going to start my business. 2 years turned into 9 years. I ended up running the operations of the recruiting group globally at the South Carolina Department of Commerce. But almost 28 years ago, I left and I started Strategic Development Group. And so I founded Strategic Development Group in 1999, and it's been an awesome ride ever since then.
I guess I met you around 2008. You were doing a headquarters project that ended in Nashville or one of the Nashville suburbs. Was it Bridgestone? Which one of those projects was that?
We did several. Bridgestone was one that changed the skyline of Nashville forever. We did LKQ and a couple of others. But yeah, that's we do a headquarters project every 2 or 3 years. The most our focus is typically manufacturing, typically in heavier industry, steel, chemical, automotive, etc. And
Yeah.
we love that. We love that space.
Well,
We
we
did
put
do
the
something interesting, Chad. We did help a company called D-Wave locate a quantum computing headquarters in Boca Raton, Florida. They announced it about 2 months ago. So we're on the leading edge. We're on the leading edge.
Well, and that leads me to something you put in your book that's probably become even more important. And I'm talking about the updated version. So let's just jump right in. It's probably more important now than even when you wrote it. You talked about how energy is really driving deals now. And every time I turn the TV on, Mark, there's a new $1 billion data center going somewhere, and we're trying to get heavy metals processing, which takes a lot of energy.
Right.
So, if anything, it's probably a bigger problem now than even when you wrote this thing, last year. So, talk about the difference in the first time you wrote the book versus now in the energy demand with all these data centers and how that's now driving projects, maybe even more so than I used to always hear that labor drove projects and sites drove projects, and
Right.
now it seems
Right.
like it's where can you get the energy? So talk about that.
Right. Right. Well, I think I wrote the first book in like 2021, and energy use in the U.S. was kind of flat. And it was just assumed if you had a big industrial project that even if you had to extend transmission, you could get it, and you could get it in a couple of years. Fast forward to COVID, and the kind of the Biden era energy policy. I mean, you've never seen such federal involvement in energy policy before with the Inflation Reduction Act. So we're doing all these site searches based on can they meet the criteria of these various programs. And then fast forward to the current administration, we cancel all that stuff or most of it, and and many of our clients were ready to announce projects based on the old policies, and we've started new searches based on a new one. So there's all that, but then there's this part of the data centers that you mentioned, because there's virtually no part of the country that's untouched. I mean, we're working in West Virginia. I mean, they're inundated with data centers. Most people are. And so the projected demand is significant, 30% over the next 5, 6, 8 years. And the question, how are we going to generate that capacity? Is it going to be investor-owned utilities? Is it going to be the companies themselves building, side power plants? Uh, nuclear or gas or other. So it's a huge topic. How it affects site selection in our business, we haven't been too involved in data centers, but what's happened with our major projects, I mean, if we have a 100 megawatt load or greater, our projects are delayed. It's like the investor-owned utilities, they're kind of dizzy from all the inquiries, and it's just an interesting time to be trying to buy some electricity.
How are you managing your clients, your manufacturer's expectations? So I ask you that from this perspective. Last year, we do one or two site selections a year, so we're not like the big guys that do a bunch like you all, but we do one or two a year. But last year, we had a company that was in metals refining, and they were going to need like 200 megawatts. And I never really could get them to understand. I've always thought I was pretty blunt and to the point. I could not get them to grasp that there just wasn't many sites with that, and that if we found it, we were going to have to jump on it before a data center did, and even if it wasn't the best incentive. Anyway, I never could get them really understanding where we are now. How have you met? I think economic developers, they look at site selectors, you've got a glorious job and all, but they don't know that you have to manage those clients' expectations. So how have you been able to do that?
Well, we'll get to this in a second. There are 4 new chapters in the new book, and one of them is called What Clients Want. We're going to get to that because that's complicated. Clients have gradually begun to understand, switchgear, transformers, there's a longer lead time, that there are costs for studies that are up front. This dizziness from so many data center inquiries. Now utilities want to do a study. They want companies to put money up front. I mean, we may not have even shortlisted sites, and they all want money for a study. So we've had to be blunt. In electricity, I guess our method of handling expectations is to deal with that much higher in the site selection funnel, because we eliminate whole states or whole regions based on we don't think we can get electricity. And we didn't used to do that. So electricity's become a higher have to have, that we're trying to cut sites as early as we can if we don't think it's going to work out.
We talked a lot about this at our Mardi Gras conference. It seems like some people said, we've all heard about the supply chain issues and how long it was taking to get, materials for electric power infrastructure and all. But some folks said that's starting to reduce now. Not ever to where it was before COVID, but it's not as 3 years out like it was a few years ago. Are you seeing that, or are you not seeing that?
No, we're seeing some of that, but what we're seeing is tack on of these studies, which take time and money, and it's almost like you're back to it 2 to 3 years. It's not uncommon for us to hear 36 months to get electricity,
Yeah.
and I would say, 5 years ago or 8 years ago, it might have been 24 months. That was more normal. So it added a year.
Yeah. Folks, we're talking about corporate site selection and economic development with Mark Williams. He's got a revised and expanded edition. We will put a link in the email where you receive this and in the YouTube show notes, so you can go find this on Amazon if you would like. So, Mark, I believe there were 4 new chapters. We talked about energy. I think one of them was you expanded the fatal flaws, if I remember. Is that right?
The 4 new chapters. One was energy, needed doing. One I just mentioned was what clients want, which is we can talk about it more, but it's like when you've worked with clients for decades, you get a sense for what they want, what they need, or you have to have that sense even when they're not telling you. You got to know. So what clients want, that's a real favorite of mine. Another chapter called the deal killers.
That's the one I was thinking about when I was talking about you expanded the fatal flaws. That's a deal killer. I'm calling it a fatal flaws.
Yeah, well, it's seasoned economic developers and you and me, you get a sense early on if there's something awry with the project. It's going to be challenged or die. And the reason I wrote that chapter is to give hopefully others more of this intuition about what's going to work and what's not, and when to recognize something's off track and not waste a lot of time and money on it. So the deal killers. The fourth new chapter is just trends, the latest trends. Energy, of course, is in there. The data center thing, all kinds of things in the trends chapter. So yeah, the book was revised. It's got an updated BMW case study in it, more stories. My wife told me I got to add more stories. I mean, when I first started thinking about writing the book, she said, you telling these stories every night at dinner, but you got to write some of this stuff down. You just can't make this stuff up. So I've added some more stories.
Right. Well, people like the first one. You can tell her. I've heard it when I'm out and about. And, there was a bunch of books in economic development came out at once, but yours certainly got a lot of credit. And you're one of the people. I know you've come to our New Orleans event. We do that event every 2 years
Love
where
it.
we invite site selectors to come speak. And our attendees tell us, Chad, bring site selectors who work real projects. Some of them just do
Right.
studies and so forth. And people always want you and Jeanette. I know Jeanette's still with you, I think.
Yeah.
And
Well,
because y'all
let me
have a
make
reputation of working projects.
let me make a point there. Jeanette is now president of the company. I've assumed a role where I'm just dealing with big key clients, and I love that spot. I get to do more work with clients and less management, which I'm delighted with.
Yeah. Well, I met Jeanette when was she with McCallum Sweeney at one time?
She was.
I
She
think I
went.
met her when she was with them. She worked a project. I was a project manager in Mobile, Alabama. I don't even think we won the project, but I got a lot of 20 years ago. I got a lot of respect from her when she came around with that project.
She's an awesome project director. She knows what she's doing.
Well, let's talk more about what kills deals. So, infrastructure gaps, I know, is one, particularly in electric power. Are you seeing? And I don't know if y'all work, many heavy water or wastewater users, but I'm hearing a lot that wastewater is a big problem in places. So, and when we hear infrastructure, we always think of power. But are you seeing gaps in either transportation or other utilities that can be deal killers that folks need to
Well,
think about?
we have fewer sites than we used to have. Many sites are taken, and so there are fewer sites, and so there's less supply of sites that have this infrastructure you refer to: rail, water, sewer, gas, electricity, and logistics. So the mere fact that the demand is still pretty good and the supply is down is a deal killer there. There are other things mentioned. I'm going to get to my key point, but the attitude of local economic development people, can they carry out their what they're committing to? There's a sense of that. You've heard things like confidentiality, etc. But I spent a lot of time in the deal killers chapter and summarize, and my quote is, time kills all deals. Time kills all deals. And what I mean by that, if a project goes on long enough, the company management's going to change, and somebody's going to change their mind about, do they really need the project? The customer's going to change what they need. There could be a political change. You got a smoking hot deal from a state or local group, and the whole political organization changes. So time kills all deals, and it's important to recognize those elements that are killing deals in that process. But eventually, if it goes on too long, it'll die. And economic developers and site selectors need to move these things along, or they just will perish. They always will.
On the labor risk side, are you seeing smaller head counts with all this AI doing stuff, or are you still seeing, the same number of jobs with a lot of your big projects? And I ask that from a standpoint of, is labor still as big? We all know labor is hard to get, but is it as hard? Is it as big a deal as it was 5 or 6 years ago? Since some companies are reducing headcount and have more capital investment. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's not as big a negative drag as it was 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe some of that's AI. I mean, first of all, capital intensity, the amount of money spent per job has been increasing for 30 years, right? This is just the latest chapter of that. But if you look, like the Site Selectors Guild just did another survey of site selectors on, what what terminates projects most often. And labor was high a couple of years ago. Now it's like 5 or 6. Energy is very high. Site availability is very high. But labor, we're hearing less about that. Not that it doesn't exist. I mean, it seemed to me that a lot of our clients, right after COVID, there were a bunch of people in their 50s with a lot of experience that just retired. They just left. They just stopped working. I mean, you had that whole end of the spectrum heading in on vacation and retirement, and you had kind of a younger group that was a little suspect of not working remote. I mean, but I think a lot of that has settled out, not completely by any stretch, but settled out some.
Yeah. I don't want to backtrack, but I do have a question. You mentioned, and we've seen this with that metals project we were doing, a lot of power companies now are requiring pretty expensive studies that take a long time too on the front end just to figure out if they can serve you and if so, what the rate's going to be. Have you seen any communities at the local level that are kind of attacking that and getting their own studies, for their own targeted industries that maybe they have to pay some pre-engineering costs just to be more ready? If I were an economic developer again, I think I would consider looking at the targets I had and then figuring out, various scenarios of maybe how I could get power to it. Are you seeing any economic developers at the local level attack that problem, or is everybody just riding along with whatever their power companies say?
Well, I'm not seeing any developers trying to do the studies ahead of time. I am see them targeting businesses that are likely to have a good chance of being served by the utilities in their region. We are seeing local entities helping pay for those studies or pay for them entirely, and expediting them. So they are jumping in here and they are doing a good job. But we're doing a pretty big search in Texas, Oklahoma, that whole region, and we eliminate whole states or whole utility regions based on they want 2 years to study it. I mean, we can't. We've got to down select. We have a delivery date. We have to make a decision that's a critical input. So we just eliminate them.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of my, I guess, frustrations is the wrong word, but one of the things I worry about, so my story is I was raised. My dad lost his job when a plant got offshored, and then he had to get construction work, and so he would leave every Sunday after the football game and come home on Friday. So I was raised in a single family home, not because of divorce, because there were no jobs in my little town, and my dad had to get construction work when the factory left town. So I mean, I believe in manufacturing, in the United States, and there's this whole push to reshore, and I know you talk about that some in your trends. Uh, but at the same time, we're adding all these data centers, and we may not have enough power and other infrastructure. So how are we going to reshore the manufacturing if we don't have enough power? It's kind of the chicken or the egg. But uh, again, I'm not complaining, but it's one of the things that I worry about. What are you seeing in trends of reshoring and bringing back jobs into the United States, and do you fear that if we don't have enough power, that's going to stop that whether we like it or not?
Well, let me talk about nearshore or onshoring first. I mean, I think there's a trend towards that. I think that's a fact, but I think there's some sense that this is just going to happen in the next year or so or 3 years. Companies don't make decisions like this, and frankly, in my view, the policies of the current presidential administration, big companies see that as a data point. They're making a 50-year decision. So they're going to see how all this discussion about onshoring and bringing things back works. We have a chemical client now. They're a European chemical client, and they have a customer base in the U.S. They don't have a manufacturing base in the U.S., and they use a lot of gas. So they want to be in the U.S. They got customers here. They need energy. Energy, because of Ukraine and such, is a mess in Europe. It's very costly. And their perspective is this: if for example tariffs, and we all talk about that, if tariffs come into play, that's icing on the cake. But their fundamental decision is there. Tariffs are icing on the cake. So I think we're going to get more business, more site selection business because of nearshoring, but I don't expect it to rock our world in the next year or 2 years. Electricity, if it's not there for whatever reasons, the local demand for AI or this or that, it's going to be an issue. Or small nuclear reactors and other things going to come in here in 5 years and make a difference? Maybe. I mean, my quantum computing friends tell me they're going to revolutionize AI and it's going to use a whole lot less electricity because of quantum. We'll see.
Yeah, my prediction too is that's where we have to go somehow. Well, because I mean, just every time I turn around, 10 billion here, 750 megawatts. It's unbelievable, and a lot of communities that need them. So I'm not against them by any means, but I also want to make sure that we have enough infrastructure for manufacturing. Talk about other site selection trends, post 2020 that you're seeing and you talked about in the book.
Well, following COVID and every kind of recession, we're going to see fewer people hired back and more mechanization, right? More capital intensity. So we're going to see more of that moving forward. We have another recession that's going to keep happening. So that's that's going on. The issue of making things in the U.S. that are strategic to make here. We're going to see more and more of that related to cyber defense, etc. I mean, I don't know if you've been to Phoenix lately. The Taiwan Semiconductors building, I don't know, $5 to $10 billion worth of chip plants out there. I mean, Taiwan made 92% of the high-end chips. So there's management of risk in their projects related to that. Our automotive business is nearly stopped. That was a third of our business. So we're not working a lot of automotive stuff right now. There's got to be some settling out of this EV thing. They're big plants all over the place that are just sitting there. That's going to be real interesting fallout in terms of trends. But I don't think we're going to see that for a while. We continue to build steel mills. We do a steel mill probably every 3 to 4 years. We've got one under construction in West Virginia right now. So I think we're going to see, construction materials, infrastructure related things. We're going to see a lot of that business. It's going to keep going.
Are you seeing companies filter sites any different now compared to pre-COVID, or has that not really changed?
I think there's a perception by, the 50 or 60% of companies that try to do this themselves and the other 50 or 60% that use us or you, the data is more important now than it was in site analysis, and that can simplify things and cut time. I think that's correct to a point. I think that's correct to a point. And in our work, data and the data we can acquire has reduced the amount of our field time early in a project, but not at the end of a project. So, we'll see where all that goes. We'll see where AI goes. I mean, a lot of our clients, unrelated to site selection, are incorporating AI back to your job piece. I mean, I can't think of any of my big clients that aren't using AI to try to make their processes more efficient. That's AI is going to make a big difference in terms of labor force. I think there are going to be a lot of people looking for something else to do.
Yeah. Well, I know the fourth new chapter is what clients want, and we talked a little bit about this when I told you my deal where I had a client that didn't understand. We just didn't have 200 megawatts
Right,
at
right.
100 sites to choose from. Talk about what you wrote in the book about what clients want from the economic developers, because they always want to know that, but they don't often put themselves in your shoes. Talk about what the clients want from you, because I think once the economic developers know that, they can host you better, they can respond to you better, and kind of have a
Yeah,
walk a mile
yeah.
in your shoes type deal. So talk about both of those perspectives, if you will.
Well, first of all, that topic's very interesting to me, and I intend to do some more writing about that because I think it applies not to just site selection, but any kind of consulting. So it's very interesting to me. And I think that economic developers and site selectors are more or less in the same boat. So what clients want from us is similar in many respects to what they want from economic developers. There are a couple of key, I could rattle off 10, but a couple of key ones. And these are things, clients expect you to be competent and trustworthy. That's kind of basic. It's kind of basic. But if you want to set yourself above as an economic developer, uh, intuition, for example, is one. I mean, clients love the ability of an economic developer to see things that aren't yet visible, right? To warn them about things that are happening, to tell them the prick that's in the zoning department that's going to cause them a problem. And so having that crystal ball and seeing things before they happen and making them better is a key one. Another one I'll just say is communication. Now, everybody thinks communication is, you write a book or you give a great speech, and that's great. That's good. They expect that. But they expect you to, as my business mentor would say, listen to them when they're not speaking. Listen to them when they're not speaking. Uh, they want you to read them. They want you to understand their method of communication. It may not be phone or email or text. It may be something else. I don't know. But they want you in their head so that this communication is outward and inward. And the great economic developers, when they're sitting in a meeting and a client's tapping their pencil or pulling on their ear or closing their eyes, they know what they're reading that client in terms of what they react positively to, negatively to, so they can do better in meeting their needs. Those are exceptional skills. And there are a number of other ones. I mean, I'll say the last one. Clients always want the economic developer to have their back. They want them to have their back 24/7. They don't want to be in a meeting and get embarrassed, called out. They want problems solved. If something's wrong, clients want to hear it first behind the scenes, and they want to know what you're going to do to fix it, but they don't want to be exposed. So anyway, it's a great chapter. People should read it because it's above the standard, and the standard is good, and trustworthiness is good, competency is good, but there are other things that can really set people at a higher level, and that's a great chapter to read about.
I thought it is too because, like I said, when I used to be an economic developer, I had good relationships with site selectors, and I always kind of admired them and wanted to be them. And they get to fly around and recording this mark on Masters Week, and sometimes they get to go to the Masters. And I've got to do all that now on this side, but it's also they've got to serve that client, and sometimes. When economic developer, I've been in meetings where all of a sudden the deal got changed, and it doesn't only look bad on them, it looks bad on you as the consultant. And I think it's good for them to walk a mile in your shoes. Well, you talked about telling stories in this book. Talk about how I think you talked about how the labor looked good on paper, but all may not be. Talk about how sometimes a community that has a smaller population beats out a bigger one because they have a better workforce program put in place or better training pipeline or so forth. You got any stories on that?
Well, I remember we back to your call it your home state in Tennessee. We were looking in East Tennessee years ago for a pretty significant manufacturing facility, and East Tennessee near Knoxville, but further up, kept looking really good from a labor perspective. It was Washington County, if you remember where that was, and we couldn't figure it out. And they had the nuclear facilities there, et cetera. Sometimes there are assets in these small rural communities that produce lots of technical people or other people. I mean, I had a similar situation in Aiken, South Carolina, when we started locating Bridgestone plants there, and the Savannah River site was laying off lots of technical people. So it's a question of finding, I'm going to say, some abnormality or some difference that is producing people or could produce people at a higher rate, and looking through that and finding it. And we look for that, or some big facility closed down, or something like that. So smaller communities need to be thinking about that. And they have to. I mean, to me, small communities, whether it's labor or anything else, they have to sell the assets. And what I've seen so much over the year is communities selling to what they think people want versus their assets, and it never ever works. Rural communities need to find people that love them for who they are and don't care about their liabilities. That's who they need to be hunting. That's why my wife likes me. She doesn't care about all my liabilities. She's focused on my assets.
Well, I got two more questions for you, and then
Uh,
I'll give you the last word to summarize all the new stuff here. But uh, economic developers listed fatal flaws. Why do you find most projects die early for a town? They may not even know that they were looking at them. So that's my one question. And number two, what's your best advice to economic developers that want to learn how to win? So number one, fatal flaws. What usually kills projects early out of the gate for a community, and then two, how can a town actually go win if you had to give them some advice?
I think what kills projects early is there's a sense with the consultant in particular, and or the client, that the community can't deliver what they need. And it may be roads or water or sewer, but there's a sense that there's a high risk and they can't deliver. That kills deals quick. Clients and consultants that get fired by clients are very risk averse. So if they sense it might not work, uh, it's a problem. What communities can do to win deals, in my opinion, is listen. Listen. Listen to what the consultant's saying. I mean, when we work a project, probably like you, we kind of peel the onion. We start with the have to haves and we work our way into the nice to haves, etc. So when we're communicating at the beginning of a project what we have to have, we want those questions answered. We don't want a 150-page volume of all kinds of things. We're going to get to that. But the quickest way to get eliminated is not answer the question. That's my perspective on those two.
Okay, awesome. Well, anything else you want to share that may be, and people may not have got the first one, so they need to go back and get it. But I heard a lot of folks even used it with their board. So I'll let you give a last review of whatever's new in here, stuff you'd want people to know.
Well, one interesting thing, Chad, is several of my competitors are giving this book to their new employees. So that says something. That's kind of interesting. It's being used at a number of universities as a textbook. Sales are in the U.S., but they're in Japan and Europe, so it's selling. It's interesting to me when you're doing an interview, and you do a lot of these interviews now virtually, and your potential client, you're talking about a topic, and they hold up your book. I mean, you never met these people, and they hold up your book, and they say, "Yeah, I remember you talking about that." So for us, it's a great marketing tool. But yeah, and I guess what I want people to remember, as you said, they can get the book on Amazon, but if they want to get it to their boards or their constituents or others, I'd be happy. I can fill orders at a discount. I can buy the books with an author's discount, and so I'd appreciate them calling me, emailing me, and I'll get it to them. But it's still probably got another year left in it and a run, and it's been quite good. And the podcast is going to be really helpful too. So
Yeah.
appreciate
Well,
it.
and we will put Mark's contact information in the email, or if you see this on YouTube, down in the show notes below, so you can see it. And yeah, I think I'll give it to our employees to read as well. That's a good idea. I've heard a bunch of people say they were sharing it with their board, because I think sometimes economic developers get a new mayor or board member, and they think they have this pristine site. I'm talking about the new mayor. Why
Right.
haven't we got anything on the industrial park? Without an understanding, you can't get the rail there. You don't have, you don't have wastewater or whatever. So I think this does a good job of letting them at least level the playing field with them.
Utilities are buying it, railroads, people who are trying to educate others how this works, where things go wrong, where things go right. They enjoy that. That's good.
And I know I see on LinkedIn from time to time that you give speeches on it at various economic development events. So if there's any associations listening, I'm sure you'd be willing to come speak at some of their events as well.
We'd love to do that. There's a website that's www.siteselectionperspective.com, and you write that down. But it's a website about the book, and it talks about speaking, it talks about ordering books. But yeah, I've probably done 20 book signings around the country and speaking related to, which I really enjoy.
Awesome. My last question, because an economic developer asked me last week, actually about a month ago, and I told him I'm going to do a show on it. Are you seeing RFIs? Uh, are you all asking economic developers to answer those differently now than before COVID? I mean, using AI in the cloud, and or are you still sending old-fashioned spreadsheets and fill it out like this? An economic developer asked me to do a video on just the differences of just doing RFIs now versus back then, and I honestly don't know. So, what is your opinion on that?
Our method, Strategic Development Group's method of an RFI, is different than many others. I'm not sure how you do it, but I see many others. They have more mechanized forms now. They're easier to complete, but we never send out long surveys. We are interested in the outer layer of the onion, the have to have. So our inquiry is going to be 3 pages long in the beginning and move from there. I'm sure AI has creeped into this, Chad. It hadn't creeped into ours, but it may. I mean, I don't know. I think you can overdose on some of that stuff too. I mean, we're just trying to get work done as efficiently as we
Right.
can.
Yeah. Awesome. I had an economic developer in Texas ask me that last week. You said you had projects looking in Texas. So, well, folks, that is Mark Williams. Again, we'll have a link below, but go get the revised and expanded edition corporate site selection and economic development. Contact him, and he'll be glad to work with you to get some to your board or other team members and come speak at your event. So, Mark, thank you for being with us today, and I'll give you
So
the last
delightful.
word.
No, delighted to be here. Glad your business is going well. Stopping by New Orleans every year, that's awesome. So I see your stuff out there too, and it's great to see.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Take care. Bye bye.